Okay, so we're going to have a look at what I think is going to be the real most significant catalyst going into the Queensland market for the next probably 3 to 5 years. And it's very simply Sydney. Okay, and the reason I say that is it's the first time ever in the history of Australia that a single property cycle has generated $1 million plus profits to a normal person. Now, it's happened in the past. If I had a super luxury house that I paid lots and lots of money, I sold it and made $1 million. But never has a normal home in a single cycle increased in value by more than $1 million ever before in Australia. And that first catalyst has happened in the Sydney market. Now, if you think back to when Singapore, when that happened all those years ago, 25, 30 years ago, where profits started doing massive gains in short periods of time, it changed everything in this marketplace. And it's going to be a very similar situation when you look at what Sydney does to the rest of Australia. Now, it's important because if you have a look at the average house prices, there's Sydney. The average is now $1 million. That's the average. But a lot of people are selling houses that they bought for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 10, 15, 20 years ago, and now selling them for $2, $3, $4 million. And again, $1 million of that profit is in this single cycle or more. And that's a massive game shift. It's a shift in mentality. It's a shift in financial capacity. And that's the big difference. Now, in doing that, you can see that they can go to Brisbane and comparatively, the same house is theoretically half that price. But importantly, if you look at the average wages, they're about the same. So a normal person in Sydney can sell their house for a substantial profit, clear out what remaining mortgage they've got, and probably have more than enough to buy another house of better standard in Queensland without a mortgage and swap their job for little or no effect. Now, again, this is a modern phenomenon. In the old days, all the big money jobs were in Sydney. If you were in WA, Queensland, anywhere else, they didn't get paid as much. But not anymore. There's a lot of comparable, a lot of federal jobs, and they're on the same pay scale. A lot of corporate jobs, and they're now relocating, but they don't charge you less salary in less location. So things have changed significantly. But this is the biggest catalyst. If I can sell, take that profit and go across the border, it's there. Now, we've also got the opportunity to take advantage of cycles. You can see Sydney's been having a phenomenal cycle. The 5-year average growth, 11.4%. 11.4. The 10-year, 9.6. Now, that is above average. The traditional average, long-term average, is 6 to 7. Now, the reason it's got higher than above average is because it's been in its growth phase. So we are closest to that growth phase. Now, after the high growth phase in every cycle is a slow growth phase, and you can see that by the last year in Sydney, it's come off 8%. But even with that 8% fall, it's averaged 11.4 over the last 5 years. So with a -8 in one of those 5, it's still averaged 11.4. That's so far above market. And that's why it's going to have softer growth for the next 1, 2, 3 years to come back to average of that 6 to 7%. But Queensland is on or about its average. It's still got its high growth phase ahead of it. So not only can a Sydney-sider sell out, realise gains, relocate, upgrade their lifestyle, swap their job almost like for like, but they can also move into the next opportunity cycle. So all of these things become very, very compelling, and you can see it's a natural progression. If we look at apartments, it's a similar story. Queensland, above average growth, New South Wales, above average growth, Queensland, below average. So if you've gone below average, you need to accelerate to come back to average. But this is compelling for another reason. In places like Queensland and also WA, houses have always been the dominant lifestyle choice because they were new markets, there was lots of land, everyone could build. But in Sydney, that hasn't been the case for 20 years. They've been used to living in apartments for 20 years. So when a Sydney-sider sells his apartment that he's lived in and moves to Queensland, he also relocates the attitude. He's used to living in an apartment. He's happy to swap like for like and live in an apartment. And the apartments now available in Queensland are amazing. So he can get a much, much better apartment at a similar or cheaper price. And he's used to that expectation of lifestyle. So you're bringing in a new philosophy and culture, and that's also helping it. So this is why I'm very confident about that. But importantly, as we've been talking all morning, it has to be a livable apartment. Not an investment apartment, a livable, proper size, high ceiling, wide lounge, comfortable place to live. But he'll bring expectation and cash. And just think again what happened in the Singapore market when your property market had explosion. You're still reaping the benefit of that 20 years later. If we have a look at the simple facts, this is one of the key reasons why Brisbane has been an underperformer this last few years. If you've ever heard me talk before, and I continue to say it today, I'm going to reiterate it many times, the single most important ingredient for property growth is population growth. And that is the same everywhere in the world. The reason is every country has a construction industry. They're never going to stop building things. But if you keep building and no one turns up to live in it, you've got too many apartments available. But if you build and people turn up, you've always got equilibrium. And if you don't build enough and more people turn up, you've got increased demand, which pushes prices up. Now, in Queensland, they kept building stuff, but look here, the trend line for the incoming population on interstate migration dropped off. Now, this is just movement of people to New South Wales from other states, to Queensland from other states. The brown line here is the movement out of New South Wales to other states. Now, you can see here there's a direct correlation between the two. That is, most people from New South Wales that leave go to Queensland. And this is very clear about that. Now you can see here, it dropped off for a while. Hardly anybody left around about that 2728. Why? Because at that time, most people were relocating on the strength of their superannuation or investment portfolio. Their houses weren't worth that much. And what happened in 2007, 2008? The stock market crashed. So where I was planning to head north to warmer weather, luxury lifestyle, all of a sudden I couldn't because my portfolio had dropped 30, 40%. So they all stayed. Their houses weren't worth that much. So they couldn't sell their house and go. There was no plan B at that stage. But they hung around, and guess what? Their share portfolios have gone back up, but not that much. But what happened at the same time was their house prices started escalating rapidly. And where they would have normally gone here, you can see they started coming back, but around about 11 when the prices started going up, you can see a decline. The reason for that was they said, our house went up a lot of money last year. We were going to go to Queensland, but why don't we wait one more year and see if we can get some more price growth? Great idea, darling. Let's wait a year. And they waited a year, and what happened? The prices went up. And then they sat down at the table and said, darling, we were going to go to Queensland this year, but look how much our price went up. It's going to go up again next year. What should we do? Let's wait one more year, darling. Great idea. And again the next year, and again the next year. But this year, when they sit down at the table and say, we were going to go to Queensland, they go, we should have gone last year because the prices went down 8%. So they're saying, Let's go before it goes down anymore. Because that's fear and greed. So now they're starting to go. But they're going, even after losing money on their property, with more money than they ever dreamed they would have. Have a look at the differential. Back in 2007-8, you see, there was the average price for Queensland, $399, $530 for Sydney, a differential of only $130,000. At the peak, look at the differential, $685,000, and we're talking average. Now, it's come off to $530,000, but that's still a fortune, and that's the average. The normal, believe you me, is significantly higher. And this is the most important thing. When the prices are rising, what do we love to do? Procrastinate. Next year, darling. Next year, darling. Next year, darling. When they're falling, we're afraid and we better do something before it's too late. And that's the difference. Let's wait, let's wait. And now it's, oh goodness. And you know the thing that makes me laugh the loudest? They're depressed about it. They've made this profit from 500 to $1.2 million or to $1.1 million, and they're depressed because they lost this $100,000 rather than being elated that they made the $500,000. That's humanity. We all get upset that we should have done better. But the great thing is, when they sell in Sydney and upgrade to an amazing lifestyle in Queensland, after about 3 weeks, they're happy again. The depression disappears because they're living twice the lifestyle with no mortgage. And that's the big difference. And that's why they're coming. If you have a look at the overall stats, again, there's the dip in Queensland. That's why it cooled off. And there you go. It was mainly that interstate migration cooling. The rest was just normal. And this trend line is now kicking back up. If we look at it even in southeast Queensland, it's even more profound. You can see it drop down as low as 50-odd thousand. Look at the escalation in such a short period of time. And as Brooke will tell you soon, they stopped building stuff. So now when all these people start turning up, there's scarcity, there's demand. And the secret is there's even more scarcity in the good stuff. Because there's still lots of average stuff that they built, but the good stuff is super scarce. And let me tell you, someone who's sold at a massive windfall doesn't buy average. They want the best. And that's why it's so profound. If you look at the long-term stats, it's all the way back to 1980. You can see this is how consistent cycles are. But Queensland should have been having a good, strong cycle, but that population drop-off was the issue. It's not so good. It's only just average growth here, 3 to 5%. Better than nothing, but no one's quite sure where it's going. But look at the spike in incoming migration on a quarterly basis. That is demand pressure. And because it's largely from New South Wales with cash, supplemented by offshore with cash, it's real high-end pressure. And that's why it's a compelling argument. If we look at, this is Sydney, look at the high growth they had when their population spiked up. That's why I'm not worried about prices collapsing in Sydney. It's an end of cycle. Look, it was 20% plus growth in some years. It's an end of cycle normal correction. The high population growth means that market is safe. It's not doom, but when you look at the value, it's not there right now. It's going to have a slow growth market with a high entry cost. I'd rather go to the next upcoming growth market where the population driver is going to take me into hyper profit, above average return, and the lifestyle benefit from these guys coming underpins the demand. So to me, I'd rather be here at a lower entry point and more opportunity than in this market at a higher entry point and likely to be passive growth because it's just had its high growth. It's not that it's a bad market. It's a great market. If you love Sydney, go for it. But when you compare what you can get in Queensland, like for like, in Sydney, trust me, you'll find that it is near on 2 to 3 times the price. So I know which one I would rather. If you look at the key thing, that population growth really is the most important thing. You know, that end of Sydney cycle, Mr. and Mrs. Smith sitting at the table saying, we should have sold last year, let's sell quickly before we can't. That fear is a driver. You look at the fact that they're coming with more cash than they've ever had in their life. Their super funds have recovered, but that's not even necessary anymore because all their wealth is in their house. And they're in large numbers. You know, 4,000 to 5,000 a quarter. And I can tell you, they're not building 4,000 to 5,000 high-end, high-value, high-lifestyle properties a quarter to accommodate that. They're building 3,000 to 4,000 average and 1,000 to 2,000 good ones. So that equation I love. If there is less supply and more demand, that's profit to me. You know, if you've been to Queensland, there's a reason why all those Sydney-siders are going there. Less traffic, less hassle, less crowded, more lifestyle, lower cost. So it's a really big lure. And like I said, they're bringing those habits, particularly apartment living habits. And that's what it's taken a while for Queensland to mature into. They're all house-bound. But they're now going used to bigger flasher townhouses, you know, bigger apartments. You know, it doesn't have to be the massive house. It can be just a high-spec small block. So all these things are changing behaviour. And most importantly for me is it's not just an apparition. This is a long-term permanent change. These people are not going to come and then go back. They're going to come and stay. And we saw this in Gold Coast over the last decade or two. In the old days, 15 years ago, Gold Coast was a boom-bust market because people would turn up and then as soon as there was no jobs, they would leave and they would decimate the market. Now they turn up, they don't leave. So that spending power, that investment capital, that activity, that workflow stays in that and has made it into a genuine populace. Same with Sunshine Coast, same with Brisbane. That's what's happening. They're keeping them now because the jobs pay the same. Because the lifestyle is better, according to the Brisbane people. And because the house you get is twice as nice, twice as new, twice as amazing for half the price. On that note, that's pretty much what's going in my mind in Queensland. You know, it's exciting right now. Brooke's going to come up now and go through some stuff more specific, I think.